Welcome back to Combat Mission Shock Force 2, where things could be going better. For those of you not keyed into British understatement, this means that I am up the creek. My opponent Halloween from the Few Good Men has stolen my paddle and is currently beating me over the head with it. The setup is a meeting engagement with Halloween in the blue corner as the Germans and myself in the red corner as the US Marines. The Marines are interesting because they have a lot of high-end kit, but they're also heavily infantry based, and while this infantry is good, no infantry is going to do well against the kind of tank mechanised team I'm expecting to face off against in this one. That's a problem for a little later though. Previewing the map, it's clear that the red side is going to have a hard time. The dominant terrain feature here is this hill. On my side, the hill is a significant obstacle. All these cliffs are impassable, so if I want to get out from my deployment zone, I have to go through this narrow pass on my left. Or go up the main road and around the side of the hill. And just to make things more fun, these exits will be covered by Halloween by the time I get there. The blue side of the map is much more manoeuvre friendly, with not only no real obstacles, but a classic reverse slope deployment zone where he can easily have some tanks in hull down positions eyeballing my two exits within about 10 seconds of the game starting. This is just one of the issues that you get with meteor engagement maps. Sometimes one side has a ground advantage and the other side has a challenge. Essentially, the problem for the red side on this one is that the blue side gets a lot of map control from the word go. Not only can blue quickly and easily cover the two red exits, but if he can get up on top of the hill, which he can do because there are no cliffs on his side, then he'll be on top of the high ground looking down into red's deployment zone. So with a tiny little bit of terrain analysis, we can very rapidly piece together an idea of what this battle is going to look like. It's not good, but from there we can start planning. The terrain may look somewhat one-sided, but the same hill that forms a barrier to me leaving my setup zone also shields me from direct observation and fire. I might be fighting at a disadvantage trying to attack out through the pass or down the valley, but Halloween is also going to be fighting at a disadvantage if he tries to attack me down the same routes. The more worrying area is the top of the hill because he has much easier access, but even then I will be defending from a reverse slope position, so while it will be uncomfortable, it's not totally compromising. The follow-on question is, can I actually succeed in this battle without leaving the safety of my setup zone? Well, there are three ground objectives. One major objective right next to me in the valley, a minor objective at the crossroads, and then round the corner on the main road there's a final major objective in the village right next to the blue deployment zone. In terms of these, I can contest the road junction without peeking the corner of the hill too much, which would leave us with one major objective each. But because this is a meeting engagement, I get 60% of my points for killing pixel truppen and breaking things. And I can't just assume that Halloween is going to be nice enough to come and attack me where he'll clearly not be at an advantage. So I either need to find a way to engage him without exposing myself, or somehow provoke him into coming at me. The answer is off-map support. All of the NATO factions have some expensive air support options, but the Marines are unique in having the Cobra gunship operating in close support. After all, the pilots and gunners here are just Marine riflemen on temporary reassignment. What I'm looking for here is a good balance between mass and firepower. A Cobra with tow missiles might be awesome, but all it takes is one lucky SAM, and the German army in Shock Force 2 has the option to bring Stingers along, and it's game over with 1,466 points down the drain. So at the less fancy workhorse end of the air support scale, we have the Cobra loaded up with unguided rocket pods. 76 70mm rockets, plus 750 armour-piercing incendiary rounds for the 20mm chin gun represents a lot of sustained firepower, with the very reasonable price tag of 244 points each. Also tagged on the bottom of the Marines' air support options are some drones, which I can use to keep an eye on the other side of the hill and call in some kind of artillery-based nastiness. So we have the foundation of a reasonable looking plan here. I can keep my force safely tucked away in my corner, covering the only two ways the enemy can get at me, while I wear him down with Cobras and drone-directed artillery. The helicopters and 155mm artillery options have plenty of ammunition, so I can keep this up for most of the game, and then attack out of my corner against a hopefully weakened enemy. The next question is, what ground force am I going to bring then? The Marines are, like I pointed out, a very infantry-oriented faction in shot force, but this is foot-mobile infantry, not mechanized. They have two vehicle options that approach the infantry fighting vehicle concept, and neither of them really cut it. The AAV is lightly armed, poorly armoured and comically oversized, and while the LAV is much better, being armed with a 25mm Bushmaster cannon, it's just as thinly armoured and can only carry 6 passengers. A Marine infantry squad is 13 pixel Truppen strong, so I'd need 3 LAVs per squad, plus a couple more to fit the Platoon HQ and heavy weapons elements in there. So the lowest number of LAVs I can cart a platoon around in is 11. This adds up to a rough but disproportionately expensive 1,000 points for a fleet of vehicles that are probably going to spend most of the game sitting around doing nothing before facing off against the much superior German Marder. The Marines are good, but they really struggle to do full-on mechanized warfare because of this gap in infantry fighting vehicle capability. I always try and build my force around the chunky infantry component, not only because infantry is so useful, but because manpower is really important for the final score calculation. Those 600 points on the table for destroying the enemy basically represent a percentage of pixel Truppen. So the more pixel Truppen you have, the more the enemy has to kill to get the points. So I'm going to have to build a very different force to what I'm used to, and to do that I'm going to be focused on winning the armour duel. The two main threats that the German army present here are Leopard 2s and Marders. And okay, the Marder's not technically armour, but it is a vehicle-based chunk of combat power, so instead of coming in from an infantry perspective, I need to come in here from an anti-vehicle angle. And that means tanks. Fancy missile systems are no substitute for depleted uranium fin rounds travelling at over 1,500 meters a second. And the Marines have access to 2 Abrams variants, the M1A1 Heavy Common, which is shared with the US Army, and the Marine-specific M1A1HC FEP for Firepower Enhancement Program. These are solid MBTs, a close match for the Leopard 2, though the 2A6 variant outcompetes them on frontal turret armour, so I'm bringing 2 platoons plus a HQ tank for 13 Abrams in total, which is a nice number of Abrams. These are from the Marine Tank Battalion, which also has a Humvee mounted recon platoon attached, and once this has been cut down a bit, it'll make a decent recce screen. I've only got 2 directions to screen, so I've got a tow Humvee and a 50 cal Humvee for each exit, plus the recon HQ. There are some empty seats in the Humvees, so I've also attached a pair of Javelin teams that can get dropped off somewhere useful. This is all good, but leaves me back with the sticky issue of infantry. I still need an infantry component, and if I can get them up the pass and around the edge of the hillside onto my reverse slope, then they'll be very useful for contesting the crest and helping control the pass. In the end, I've gone for a single infantry platoon. It doesn't feel like much, but when you think that each Marine squad is twice the size of a Panzer Grenadier squad, it feels a lot better. The infantry platoon is standard, but it has some top-heavy appendages. I've left its company HQ in, because this comes with a pair of Javelin teams, and I've left the battalion HQ in above that as well, because I get access to a second fire control team this way. The first is with the Tank Battalion HQ, plus another 2 Javelin teams. To complement these, I've added in a pair of trucks, not only because they can ferry my infantry around en masse, providing that no one is shooting at them, but because they carry a couple of Javelin reloads each. Plus, I've also brought a troop carrier Humvee for some extra flexibility, and because I want to get 2 Javelins into a position on the right map edge as fast as possible. That way I can get some coverage around the corner of the hill and look into the blue side of the map. Finally, I've got 2 target reference points and, attached to the infantry, a sniper team. This is at the recommendation of my good friend General Sir Anthony C.H. Melchett, who pointed out that the unassuming Mark 211 rounds this team has for their 50 caliber rifle is the tits. This ammunition is otherwise known as the Raufoss round, and it is an armor-piercing, explosive, incendiary round which will do nasty, nasty things to whatever it hits, and is capable of seriously messing up light vehicles and inflicting gratuitous overkill on individual pixel truppen. I'm not a sniper team fan, but that is just too cool to leave behind, and I might get the opportunity to surprise Halloween with it. With the game kicking off then, I have 3 things to get done. I have to take up positions to cover the pass on my left and the valley on my right. I have to get some of my Marines up the pass and around onto the hill without exposing them to enemy fire, and because Halloween and I have agreed not to use any pre-planned support, I need to get that drone called in. Halloween has his own priorities, and the Germans are racing into position too. A Javelin team dropped off at the end of the pass, spots a Leopard 2 rolling forward on the far side of the map, and the gunner starts the engagement process, but before he gets very far, he is physically hit by a 120mm shell. Combat Mission doesn't model this kind of thing, but I'd guess that this unfortunate pixel truppen has been literally obliterated. First blood to the Germans. That shot didn't come from the spotted Leopard, it looks like it came from the direction of Halloween's setup zone. So the silver lining to the bloody cloud of vaporized Javelin gunner here is that I know he has at least 2 Leopards, and I know roughly where they are. The 2 Javelin teams that I sent off in the troop carrier Humvee are getting into position as well, and by the end of turn 2, I've got eyes on a Leopard, a Marder and a Wolf utility vehicle near the blue setup zone. Plus I've picked up a load of engine noise in the centre of the map, heading towards the hill and the pass. Halloween is smart enough to pull his setup zone Leopard back down into safety, instead of leaving it out in the open where I can conveniently javelin it, but it's looking like things are going about the way I expected. I've gotten my Abrams in position in the valley, and the infantry I've sent into the pass is making its laborious way up the hillside so they can hook around onto my side of the crest. They're not going as fast as I would like though. They are running up a steep slope in full kit in 33-degree heat, so I guess I can't complain. I had originally thought about getting them up there in some troop carrier Humvees, but the Germans are already a little close for comfort, and at least the infantry should have an easier time passing unnoticed. Sometimes though, the enemy doesn't need to actually spot you. The importance of the pass is pretty obvious, and Halloween starts hitting it with 155mm artillery just at the end of turn 3. This is really not good. I want that infantry up on the hill, and while they're luckily not directly under the bombardment, 155s have a big area of effect, and they are catching fragments. The Marines' body armour is doing its job in some cases, but not in others, and they're all pinned down very quickly. Also not good is the fact that Halloween is pushing the combined arms button in the pass as well. He's dismounted his Panzer Grenadiers under cover of the arty, and when my front runners up on the hill turn to engage them, they're smothered with 20mm cannon fire from some unspotted Marders. The squad leader is hit, and they run for it. Very rapidly, it looks like I simply haven't been fast enough to get any pixel truppen up that mountainside, and my infantry is now stuck and exposed on the edge of the pass in a pretty damn precarious position. Events on the right pan out a little differently. Halloween is dropping RT here too, pummeling the road in the central objective, but I'm nowhere near it, and when he moves a pair of Leopards into hull down positions looking into the valley exit, there are 3 Abrams waiting for them. One of the Marine tanks wins the spotting race and gets the first shot off, scoring a lucky partial penetration on the leftmost Leopard's gun mount. Both of the German tanks immediately button up, pop smoke and reverse away. The Abrams fires again at the same target, but although the round connects, it fails to penetrate the lower turret front. By doing so, the Abrams also attracted the attention of an unseen Marder, which gives it a couple of bursts of 20mm cannon fire that splatter across the turret, but don't do any major damage. That's a reasonable first contact on this flank though. Getting smacked in the face by 2 depleted uranium fin rounds isn't going to be doing that Leopard's optics any favours, and a partial pen on the main gun mount could easily mean wounded turret crew or damaged internals. The Leopards drop out of sight behind the crest of their hill, but that doesn't mean that they're safe. My remaining javelin launcher over the pass had managed to draw a bead on the second Leopard and gotten a missile away before the operator was taken out by the artillery. The javelin knows what it's aimed at though, and it doesn't much care about what's going on behind it. It dives in and hits something. With no crater, I can only assume it's the second Leopard. The Leopard 2A6 might be able to shrug off 120mm armour piercing rounds to the turret front, but I don't think that top armour is going to stop a javelin. My javelin teams on the right also make a spot and successfully engage a Marder near the village objective, putting a missile literally through the commander's hatch and through the commander. The drone comes in, but is quickly found by 2 Stinger missiles and blown out of the sky. So my ability to see what's going on the other side of the hill has just gone down the crapper. Both missiles look like they came from the same position though, and I know that Stinger teams consist of 2 launchers with no reload, so if Halloween has only been able to squeeze 1 anti-air team into his force, I might be okay. The Cobras are 1 minute behind the drone, so I'll find out soon enough. It's worth stepping back a minute and processing all of this. Events thus far have taken us up to the end of turn 4. We're only 4 minutes into the game, but the amount of information that's come in already about the enemy's force and intentions is massive. I haven't had a lot of concrete spots, but the spots I have been very significant. I've seen 2 Leopards on the right and 1 in the blue deployment zone alongside another probable. That makes 4 overall, or a single tank platoon made up of Leopard 2A6s. I've seen a couple of Marders and seen plenty of sources of rapid 20mm cannon fire, so it makes sense to assume that all these light armour contacts I've got are also Marders. I've got 4 in the pass, plus dismounted infantry, which would correspond to a Panzer Grenadier platoon. There are more non-confirmed spots coming up on Halloween side of the hill, and a single spot in the forest in between the Abrams and Leopards on the right. It doesn't make sense to send much less than a full platoon to these places, they're both important areas, so now we have 2 more platoons of Panzer Grenadiers. Then there's the artillery. The Germans only have one 155mm artillery option, the excellent Panzerhaubitze 2000, which comes in 2 gun sections. I've had 2 155mm fire missions drop in without warning, so not only did Halloween bring 2 Panzerhaubitze sections, but he must have also brought 2 target reference points along to have brought his artillery into action so quickly and without any spotting rounds. A Panzer Grenadier company with tank and artillery support adds up pretty well in the force selector given the funds, so even if this backplotting is a little off, if there are extra Leopards or other elements in there, I've got a pretty damn good idea of what Halloween has brought to the fight. And what I'm seeing at the moment is that despite the impending carnage on the left at the pass, the worrying likelihood of German troops coming over the hill, and the temporarily shut down threat of the Leopards on the right, despite all this, I'm not in a bad position. This situation conforms to the terrain analysis, the enemy force conforms to what I was expecting, and sure, things are developing towards worst case scenario territory, but this is a worst case scenario that I've anticipated and planned for. So, now that we've gotten the initial clash out of the way, and this is always the most nerve-wracking part of any meaty engagement, we're settling into our 2 sustained engagements on the flanks. On the left, German infantry and Marders are pressuring the end of the pass, and on the right, the Abrams and the Leopards are facing off. In both of these situations, I'm the one holding position, so the pressure is on Halloween to make the moves and try and force me out. That means that, for the most part, the mistakes are his to make. It's not pretty, especially in the pass where the Marders remain annoyingly invisible and the Marines are suffering, but very quickly a 3rd area of engagement opens up. The Cobras come in. They're met by 2 more Stingers, but the missiles fail to connect. One of the Cobras gets a few rockets off before the final Stinger forces it to evade and pull off, but the other gets stuck in. 70mm rockets start hitting the Germans at the end of the pass. This is some good news. No more SAMs are going up, so it looks like I've got unlucky. I might regret losing the drone, but it soaked up half the enemy's anti-air, and I'd rather lose that than one of the Cobras. I'm not going to know what they're engaging on the other side of the hill, but I can live with that as long as they're engaging something. It's not going to be all my way though, not by a long shot. Trying to take advantage of the Cobra strikes to push up out of the pass ends in disaster again, as Halloween readjusts his artillery right on top of my Marines. The damage isn't as bad as it would have been if they weren't split down and spread out, but 155mm air bursting rounds will shred infantry pretty much no matter what you do. The sniper team with the Raufoss rounds give it back at least, managing to clean up any German pixel tripping they see when they're not cowering. Sniper teams are the one exception to my regular experience rule. They're usually so cheap that it doesn't cost very much to bump them up to crack or release, and if they get into a good position like this, it really pays off. On the right flank, my Javelin teams are being suppressed by 120mm mortar fire, so they're busy keeping their heads down, and Halloween is adjusting his other Panzerhaubitzer section onto one of my Abrams, possibly using the shells as a little cover to roll a Leopard forward and take a peek again. I've still got forces waiting for him though. An Abrams in depths scores a hit before the Leopard is even in position. This fails to penetrate, but the blast takes care of the opened up tank commander, seemingly throwing the Leopard off to the point that it fails to reverse away. Taking advantage, the Abrams keeps hammering it until it gets lucky. A thin round strikes the upper front hull, and despite only being a partial penetration, the Leopard brews up. Behind that tank is the knocked out hulk of the Leopard hit by the Javelin earlier, so that's two serious threats, and potentially half the German tank strength already accounted for. It doesn't mean I can rest easy over here though. Halloween could have anti-tank teams up there too, and I still need to stop him from occupying the road junction. He definitely has some kind of forward observer up on that hill, and one of my Abrams only avoids a deluge of accurate 155mm fire because I reverse it away. This is showing up the key weakness of my right flank. It's overlooked from that hill. I need my Abrams to stay there to stop the enemy from advancing, but there really aren't very many good positions to do that from. I've got a bit of a catch-22 here. If I leave the Abrams where they are, they're going to get artied, but if I start moving them around, they won't be hulled down anymore and they'll be vulnerable to anti-tank weapons. I pick the arty and stay put. It's not a good choice and it's a significant risk because those Panzerhaubitzers are accurate as hell, and at this stage I don't know whether a direct 155mm hit on an Abrams will knock it out. But the risk to my force as a whole if the Abrams retreat, or to the Abrams if they're caught out by another Leopard or Milan anti-tank guided missiles, is at least as bad and probably worse. So I'm just going to have to take this one. It's highlighted a gap in my terrain analysis. That hill could really have done with a TRP on it so I could quickly direct my own artillery on any FOs up there, but it's too late to do anything about it now. As it turns out, Halloween pummels my tanks, and in short order I have 3 immobilized Abrams with severely degraded subsystems, but no losses. Somewhat amazingly, they've shrugged off multiple direct hits that I would have expected to destroy them. I'll take it though, because all this enemy artillery has been hitting my relatively intact tanks instead of contributing to the fight in the past. This has been getting progressively messier. I've got my own 155s in, and the Cobras are continuing to shoot things up, but while it looks as though the Panzer Grenadier platoon at the mouth of the pass isn't pushing, another platoon is moving on the hilltop. That's on my list of things I really don't want to happen in this game, so not only do the 155s get adjusted up there, but I have an Abrams down in the valley hammering some German pixel truppen on the crest. Armada makes an appearance as well, hosing down a Javelin team with 20mm fire and then Milaning a Humvee. It has been spotted by one of the Javelin teams out on my right, but they fired off their last missile the previous turn. It took out an Armada, but right now I really need this specific Marder over here on top of the hill to get hit by something. The immobilized Abrams Company HQ finally makes the spot and takes it out, and this combined with the repulse of some probing Panzer Grenadiers at the pass has hopefully knocked the enthusiasm out of the enemy. I am down an Abrams at this point though. Halloween has moved what I assume is another Leopard up to engage my tanks in the valley, and successfully knocked one out without me getting as much as an unconfirmed spot. He's also handling his Marders very well, pulling off some pretty textbook shoot and scoot work on my infantry at the pass, where the first indication I have that something terrible is going to happen is a hail of 20mm cannon fire, and the Germans are back behind the slope before I can do anything about it. But the sustained endurance phase of this battle is about to come to a close. My yardstick for this is actually the Cobras running out of rockets, which they just about have, meaning that the enemy on the back slope of the hill are about as worn down as they're going to get. I have 5 still mobile Abrams to set loose, 4 of which have been sitting not very far from my deployment zone all game and have hopefully gone unnoticed, and it's time to roll the dice and get the counterattack in. The tanks all head up the pass, where they're going to be able to pie off the map using the hillside as a pivot point, with much better opportunities for hull down positions than the valley on the right. This counterattack is a lot less dramatic than it sounds. It's less of a sudden strike and more of a creeping expansion of firing angles, but that doesn't make it any less dangerous. The first Marder to go down is right on top of the hill, almost looking down into the pass, and although it gets a stream of 20mm fire off at the Abrams reversing into position opposite it, it's quickly destroyed. The Marine armour advances up the pass carefully, always with overwatch and always with their frontal armour towards the enemy, ruthlessly killing off Panzer Grenadiers and Marders as they go. The Leopard 2 back in Halloween's setup zone makes a dash to redeploy after it's been strafed by one of the Cobras, but when it pops up it's immediately spotted by the Abrams on top of the pass and suffers instant destruction when a 110mm fin round bisects it diagonally, going in through the left front of the hull and out through the rear right. The Leopard burns and the Abrams keep rolling. As the angles expand, the Marines take out Marder after Marder, and there's very little the Germans can do about it. 20mm fire can't penetrate the Abrams from the front, the Abrams are inside the Milan's 400mm minimum range, and to make matters even worse, the Marders have had 2 Cobras strafing them with cannon fire and 70mm rockets for most of the game. Their optics and subsystems are degraded enough that some of them fail to react to the Abrams rolling up in front of them in plain sight. After a few minutes, I'm up on the hill, looking down on a slope covered with burning Marders. Then the final Leopard gets spotted. This is tucked into a hull down position on the far map edge, where it can cover almost my entire left flank. If I want to go any further, and I do, I want to muscle in on the village objective and the remaining Marder platoon I have templated on the other side, then I'll have to deal with it. An Abrams opens the contest, but the shot fails to penetrate the top of the gun mantlet. The Leopard replies with a fin round that punches straight through the Abrams mantlet, killing the commander and destroying the tank. The crew bail out, but they're the only ones with the spot, and the other Abrams struggle to acquire it. The Leopard shoots again, this time putting a round through the commander's cupola of another Abrams. Somehow, the commander survives. The gunner is killed and the loader is wounded, which seems weird given the layout of the turret, but the result is that this tank is also a total write-off. That's how quickly things can turn around in the modern combat missions. One enemy tank in a good position was all it took to stop my counterattack in its tracks. It's achieved its immediate goals though. I've cleared the Panzer Grenadiers off the hillside, inflicted heavy losses on the enemy, and I've gained the freedom of manoeuvre I need to deal with the Leopard problem. For the first time in the game, my Pixel Tripper can get out of the pass without having to run the gauntlet, and I should be able to get an FO up onto the hill in short order, where they can splurge the rest of my 155mm arty ammo on that pesky Leopard. That's going to take a while though, and in the meantime I send out a ceasefire feeler to Halloween. We're both dealing with invisible enemy forces at this stage, and the crunch point of the battle has definitely passed. With 23 out of 75 minutes left on the clock, we agree to a ceasefire. The result is a slightly surprising minor victory for the Marines. A minor victory in combat mission is about as close as you can get to winning without it being a draw, and the points reflect this. I've got 561, but Halloween is hot on my heels with 433, so there's only 128 points between us. In the end, the Germans have suffered 75 men dead and 23 wounded, losing 3 Leopards, 11 Marders and 2 Jeeps, but it hasn't exactly been one-sided. I've taken 35 dead and 23 wounded, having lost 3 Abrams, 3 Humvees and a drone. Halloween really made me work for this, and with only a little bit better luck here and there, the result could easily have swung in his favour. I am definitely looking forward to a rematch. Tactically speaking, the 2 big takeaways from this one are how much that terrain analysis matters, how it's possible to profit from even awkward and apparently one-sided terrain with the right plan, the right force and a lot of patience, no matter how bleak things look, and secondly, how fast the lethality of modern weapons can turn a battle like this around. I wasn't very confident when I sent my Abrams in at the end, but they very rapidly cleaned up, only to be stopped short even faster by that final Leopard 2. Overall though, I'm finding blue on blue battles in Shock Force much more balanced than the standard red versus blue fare. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you in the next video.